Following yesterday's heartbreaking loss against the Philadelphia Flyers, Sheldon Keefe came out and called out his entire team, leaving no one safe. So I'm going to break down those exact comments in this episode of Leafs Digest, as well as discuss TJ Brodie. Fans are upset. The coach is upset. He is not playing well whatsoever, and some changes seem to be potentially on the way. So stay tuned for all that in this episode of Leafs Digest. But before we do, quick reminder, hit the subscribe button. We are on the road and very close to 7,000. About 80% of you who are watching are not subscribed. So if you aren't already and you like daily content for the Toronto Maple Leafs, make sure to hit that button. Now, Darius, a lot to get into today. Pretty rough loss yesterday. Obviously only a one-goal loss, but Sheldon Keefe, he called out the team. He called out even Ilya Samsonov, who's been playing so well as of late, aside from his last couple starts. I'm just going to get into the comments and I'll get your opinion on what your thoughts are on all of this. And here's what he had to say on the Leafs hitting the post and crossbar 6 times tonight. We weren't ready to go. That's on me. To start the game in the first period, dig yourselves a hole. It's amazing when you do that. All of a sudden, the luck doesn't go your way. He also went on to say regarding Ilya Samsonov, he was like the group. I didn't like anybody tonight. Forward, defense, goaltending, didn't like anybody. And there's another quote there that I just highlighted, but I'll read that out in a second. What are your thoughts on these first two quotes? Obviously, the Leafs were pretty unlucky yesterday, but he called out himself a little bit. He called out Ilya Samsonov. You can't really blame. You can blame some of it on luck, but they didn't look prepared to win this game, whether or not they hit the post a half a dozen times or not. What are your thoughts? I know you mentioned it in yesterday's video, in their post-game video, but it was not a good look for the Leafs yesterday, and they didn't look ready at all.
No, they didn't look ready to go, and it's been the story of the Leafs since like even the Mike Babcock days. They're just not ready to go and not ready to go on time, and they dig themselves these holes that they can't get out of. Yes, we were looking at it like, hey, they're hitting a bunch of posts. They play well, which is true. I thought there was a lot to like in the game yesterday, and they could have been up big. But you can't leave things like that up to chance, and they do that very often, and they did again last night. And I thought the comments themselves are a little bit puzzling on one side, but the way I'm choosing to look at it is he was not trying to. He kind of did throw Samsonov under the bus a little bit in a way with that quote, but he was trying to just generalize everyone. Nobody was good, and he's not trying to pinpoint anyone like Brodie or Samsonov. He's just trying to throw everyone into the group and just say, hey, we were no good tonight. Let's just wrap it up and move on, and work on these things. So I think that's good from your coach. Like sometimes you do need to call people out, but I think he's trying to protect some of his players here, which I think is admirable in a way. And I think Sheldon Keefe is a good coach too, because a lot of people, he's under a lot of fire on Twitter and socials and all that stuff right now, as he always is after losses, really. People want him fired after every single loss. He's one of the best coaches in Leafs history, top 5 in wins, will probably be top 3 by the time he's, let go, whenever that is. Could be next year. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen in the playoffs and stuff like that. So I think it's just a situation where he's trying to protect some of his players, but at the same time, make it known that he didn't like anyone's game. And honestly, when you look at the game, the entire game, I'm not sure you could like anyone's game. However, there were a few players that were much worse than others.
Yeah, and we'll get to him in a second. One quick final quote before we do get into that. Here's on what he said on how the Leafs fell behind. Didn't play well enough on our half of the ice with or without the puck. Just weren't sharp mentally. Couldn't pass the puck, couldn't handle the puck, didn't defend, didn't compete, so not a lot to like. He really went all in after. I mean, he's done this. We've seen this before, not maybe this exact, and you mentioned it. I don't think he was trying to call out Samsonov. He said basically, he grouped them. He was like the group. I didn't like anybody, and you can't really always blame the goaltender. And I don't think he even had that bad of a game. Ilya Samsonov obviously wasn't great, but again, the last game before this, he also didn't play phenomenally. So maybe it was just a bit of a weird game yesterday. Obviously, it would have been nice to get a win against the Philadelphia Flyers. And Sheldon Keefe, he was mad. He was quite mad if you actually watched the thing after the game. But let's touch on this now. And this is Brodie's struggles continue here. And we can still talk about the Keefe stuff. But, I mean, we made a video on it, or you made a video on it a couple days ago. What did you see out of him yesterday? Do you think it might be time? And we're going to look at some advanced stats. We'll start with the game score impact card for the Leafs. And you can look at this. And you can see TJ Brodie's almost a -2. By far the worst on the team out of every player who played. John Tavares had a very good game. Bertuzzi keeps his hot streak going. Even Connor Dewar is played pretty well. Darius, very bad for TJ Brodie, and it's not getting much better the more he plays. And obviously, he's a guy who's been pretty important to the Toronto Maple Leafs the past couple of years, but right now, it's not going well.
No, I just wonder if he's a guy, we've mentioned it the last couple of videos, if he's a guy who would benefit from a little bit of a break, 1 or 2 games off, just give him a break and reset mentally, because the season's long, and when things are not going well for you, it's hard to get yourself out of that hole consistently when you're playing every night. And again, they played tonight against Washington Capitals, another team who are in playoff contention. All of a sudden, again, this is going to be a hard game, right? It's not going to be a cakewalk like we've seen with some other teams. And like you mentioned, I like taking a look at the game score impact cards because it gives you a feel for how the game went versus like what you saw on the ice and really get a feel for what players were doing out there. And Brodie by far was the Leafs' worst player again. Like if you look at the scorecards for the last couple of weeks, he was the worst player on the ice again. And I think like he has a little bit of good offense in the game, and I think it's because he had like a one-timer shot that went on goal, and that might just be it, right? So defensively hasn't looked good. And I just wonder if it's the pairing again. Like having him in the lineup, I know the injury to Lyubushkin kind of messes things up. You want to keep the other lines the same, the other defensive pairings the same, but him and Riley just don't work. And everyone was saying it last night. Everyone's under the same mindset. We all know what we're seeing. We feel like our intelligence is being insulted because it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. So Riley and Brodie cannot be played together. And I just wonder if Brodie is even an option for the next couple of games. I wonder if he plays tonight. It might be something to take a look at. We haven't heard anything about the lineup specifically yet. But I just wonder if he would benefit from some time in the press box for a few games.
Yeah, and you look at the scorecard yesterday. I mean, none of the defensemen really played phenomenally besides Liljegren had a decent game, but even Benoit had a pretty rough game out there as the second worst. So even though we're on the Benoit train, he'd had a pretty rough game yesterday. A lot of its players had a bad game, and it kind of goes to show what Sheldon Keefe said. Tavares had a pretty decent game, but other than that, it wasn't great. And something else I want to pop up here is you mentioned it. You can see it on the screen now, the Leafs defensive pairing stats with that Riley, Brodie, McCabe, Benoit, Edmondson, Liljegren, and Riley Liljegren. Mm-hmm. The Riley Brodie is just not working at all. Time to try some other options. Like everyone is clamoring for this to happen, and I mean I tend to agree with you. I mean I don't know what else they're supposed to do. Obviously Keefe, he likes, you know what I mean. He doesn't like changing things very often, especially regarding the defensive. Or sometimes he'll do it like when they took out Benoit, who was playing very well.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at the, I mean obviously the game impact card, it plays a picture and paints a picture for last game, but not necessarily as a whole. But when you're looking at the actual pairing of Brodie and Riley, it hasn't been working. You called it out. We've called it out for the past few days now, and I wonder if tonight's the night they change something. We won't know. I'm sure you'll cover that in your post game, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is right now, but they have to start juggling things, and I think they've started to do that, especially because of injuries on the forward side. But I think heading into the playoffs, you know what has kind of worked, like McCabe and Benoit for the most part has worked. So maybe that's something you'll revisit in the playoffs, right? But until the playoffs, I think start juggling things around and seeing what works from game to game, right? Don't bring out the blender like every single shift every time and stuff like that. But I think you have to start experimenting. In that graphic that we had, or the Leafs defensive pairing stats at 5-on-5 last night, Riley Liljegren, like maybe that's something you can kind of, I don't know if that would work in the playoffs, but maybe just try it, see if there's something there, a spark, because the stats, I know it was a very small sample size, but the stats looked pretty good. So maybe just experiment with that, because like we were saying, Riley and Brodie together, 29% score adjusted goals. It's unplayable. It's not a thing that can happen come playoff time. I don't think it will, but if they are in a pinch with injuries and stuff like that, I'm just worried. I'm just worried what everything's going to look like heading into the playoffs. And I'm not 100% confident they found more than one defensive pairing that works heading into the playoffs. So I think they have to start experimenting and seeing what works, and we'll see what happens tonight. I wonder if they keep it the same.
Yeah, we'll keep you tuned for that, of course, with the post-game video that you're doing. But let us know. That'll wrap it up. Your thoughts on all of this, and Sheldon Keefe really, like we've seen him do in the past, not hold back regarding his team. But thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. We're very close to 7,000, and we'll see you later today.